I know you've had a nice, long, busy day. I have too.
Right.
But it's nice to get together at night and sit down and talk about some of these issues that we keep helping people with and working with people so much regarding COVID-19, coping with it, dealing with the stress of it. As you were saying, the trauma of it. I want to hear more about what you're thinking about the trauma of it. So,
Well, before we got together, I was reading an article by Bessel van der Kolk, who's written the book "The Body Keeps the Score," and he's really kind of the expert of the go-to in terms of trauma and trauma recovery, and really framing the pandemic in that concept of that it is a global trauma and something, it has changed our world and changed our lives and is something that's not within our control. So applying some of the trauma therapy or trauma concepts to how to deal with the pandemic, I thought was really valuable. One of the things he talked about was having structure in your day and how important that is. Similarly with somebody who is newly addressing trauma, there is a sense of lack of control, lack of certainty, lack of fear. There's a tremendous amount of fear, and I think that's really what's happening for people. Is there's so much that isn't known, and there's not one place to get the answers, and creates a great deal of fear. And so that will trigger for people, if they've had other experiences in their life where they've been afraid or where they've had trauma that's caused a lot of fear. So some of the things to me that he was talking about made a great deal of sense in terms of having structure in your day, moving your body. Now, I thought that was really interesting too, and that part of what happens with trauma is you often the experience is you're physically stuck and you're not able to get out of it. You're trapped.
yeah.
And so being quarantined at home or having all of the things that you used to do be taken from you can feel like you're being trapped. And so the importance of being able to physically move your body to be able to have some type of way to be productive, have a project, have kind of activities that you are engaging in that are purposeful and meaningful. So I think, as this pandemic is turning into more of an endurance event versus a blip, this is trying to find how to survive and how to continue to stay healthy, physically and emotionally, primarily, emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could ask a couple of things, sounds like a fascinating book.
Right.
When you're talking about trauma, a lot of people don't really understand a definition of trauma in the sense, and because you're adding to that fear,
Hmm.
and so trauma and fear are related. Is it the same thing as anxiety, or is it something else?
I think it can be a portion of it. I think you can think of fear and anxiety on a continuum. And trauma
Hmm.
is the event that creates the anxiety and the fear. Trauma is,
Okay.
and it's also in the eyes of the beholder. Depending, two people can have the same experience, and one will perceive it as traumatic, and the other will. And the other thing that's different is it creates a physiological change. That's the difference. So the event activates your physical response, and that your body, that's the idea the body keeps the score, is your body is holding on to that. Your body does not forget. Your frontal lobe, your thinking brain, might not remember, but you physically remember what has happened, and that can cause a great deal of distress for people.
Hmm.
Um, so um, finding the causes that activate the fear and the worry and the stress.
So
And certainly COVID has created that for us.
how much you mentioned something real interesting there that might give us some choice in the matter. It's
Mm,
that trauma is based on maybe a personal definition or a personal perception
right.
of what this is all about.
Hmm.
All right. So if that's the case, um, it's like if somebody's going through something, perceiving COVID-19 as being highly traumatic and the isolation and everything, you think there's a way, or did the author talk about a way to bring, you mentioned physical activity, which to me, if you put a schedule in and then you create some physical activity, you're sort of getting control of yourself again.
Right. Yes.
Is
And that's a great point. Yeah, that's a good observation. And that is part of the structure that he talks about, and having breaking up your day into certain activities, having part of the day that you work, part of the day that you socialize, part of the day that you're physically active. And so that is healing to the brain, and healing to the body physiologically.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so identifying that you do have some choice. You don't necessarily have any choice about COVID, but you do have a choice about how you respond to it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good thought. Real good thought. Because when it comes to having some sort of choice that you can make, um, you know, I enjoy coaching. We're both licensed therapists, been licensed in the state of Tennessee for some time. But I get a chance to coach people, actually, not just do therapy with depression. And one of the
Right.
things that comes up in the program a lot is choosing activities, and I insert the word intentional
Hmm.
because a couple of points that keep coming up is find activities that make you feel confident and proud of yourself.
Right.
How do you feel confident and proud of yourself within COVID-19? Do you think that's possible?
And those are great points. Yes, I do think it's possible. I think, cooking a new recipe, a meal that you
Hmm.
hadn't tried before to feel confident, taking on a new physical challenge, perhaps, participating in an online class of some way. But that there are ways. And, the other thing that does is it creates sort of the muscle memory in your brain. When we rehearse, when we are intentional, when we remember those positive feelings, those positive events, we then begin to heal our brain, but we also begin to create new neural pathways that create that positive feeling and
Yeah.
reduce that depression.
Yeah. I heard somebody today talk about, and this sounds so strange, but she said, what positives can you think of that has come out of COVID-19? And I'm relating that back to what you're talking about, creating new neural pathways, getting a new perspective. Because when we're trapped, we really don't think about good things happening. We don't think, well,
Right.
how great is it to be trapped, obviously, but there may be things while being trapped that we can discover or rediscover.
Hmm.
And one of the things that somebody in the audience said was spending more time with family.
Right.
I mean, we work so hard, and before COVID-19, we're all working. Maybe we have a house. Maybe we're fortunate enough to be in an apartment or a house or something, but we don't spend any time in it. We're just glad to have
Right.
it. Maybe we like our car, but spend 5 minutes a day in it. And we just
Hmm.
don't have any time, or our loved ones who are in the home with us. And this has been a, an opportunity to create new things like you're mentioning. And
Right.
yeah.
And I think also noticing things that are good in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and that also takes intention to positively. I notice things in my yard now that I may not have noticed before. When we have a nightly ritual, the dog and I will walk outside and look for the bunny because the bunny emerges in the same part of the yard every evening. And
Oh,
so, I don't know that I would have noticed that before or
yeah.
spent so much time looking for the bunny. So being able to find kind of small pleasures, and that again creates those positive neural pathways. It's pretty remarkable. Our brains are an organ like any other part of our body, and we can do things that will help it be healthy.
Hmm. So you're saying, in a word, it sounds like you're talking about becoming more creative
I guess that could be it. Yeah. Yeah.
in observation. And that, creativity is a great medicine regarding stress and anxiety. It seems like trauma. Anytime I've worked with somebody that has gone through a lot of trauma, it seems to be really healthy to find creative writing, creative journaling styles, drawing, coloring,
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
kinds of things like that to help guide the mind back into all kinds of benefits like choosing a path or choosing something, choosing a color gives you some sort of control over something where it felt like you had no control over anything for so long, and you start regaining
Exactly.
some things. Is that
Mhm.
kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think also, again, sort of back to movement and finding ways to move the body where you have control over, it could be walking, it could be dancing, it could be, an athletic event or, an athletic pursuit. Again, it's finding those activities that help you feel free,
Mm,
feel
yeah.
empowered,
Wow. All inside of COVID-19.
all inside of COVID that you can
Yeah.
do, in your home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, Kind of reminds me of a long time ago, I used to facilitate grief support groups.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I would ask the group after we got to know each other really well and they could trust where our discussion was going and they were involved with helping each other and being creative in their comments to each other and their own and being honest, I would ask them a crazy question like, what are the, something like, what are the freedoms? Um, I would call it, what are the liberties and laws that you're
Mm,
starting to discover? And it was really that, I guess it was really that turnabout, that turning point
right.
where you're beginning to say, accepting the COVID-19 circumstance, now what do I
Hmm.
do? Rather
Right.
than
And
fighting against it.
fighting against it or denying it or hiding from it. So
Yeah.
now, and I think that is a positive. It's being able to have I think that's a good way to describe it is to have what freedoms do you have? What's actionable? What's within your control? What can you do? Because there are things you can do. There's
Yeah.
always something you can do.
That's a good thought right there. There's always something different. There's always something
Mm-hmm.
different you can do. Um, that's a good thought. I mean, so it's challenging yourself to be more independent and not dependent on circumstances. And
Well, and quit trying to change the things you can't change.
yeah,
Quit spending your energy on things that are not going to provide relief or that are just going to exacerbate the worry.
yeah, yeah. I was talking to a group of turned out to be HR professionals recently,
Hmm.
and we were talking about coping with COVID-19, and a thought occurred to me and presented it to them. We talked about this idea of um, creating or um, be. Let's see, how did it go? Um, well, I went back to and I thought it was a good time to think about it. Back to 9/11, what we call now
Hmm.
9/11.
Right.
When that happened, we thought the world had changed and nothing will ever be the same and we'll never enjoy a minute again. I mean,
Hmm.
that's trauma.
It was trauma.
Yeah, if we're
Most definitely.
yeah,
Hmm.
you and I are old enough to remember that starkly, and most people who might listen to this would be too. But over the decade and more, it has almost 2 decades now become not okay, but ordinary.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with is ordinary, so we
Hmm.
can even go to the beach and have fun, or go to the mountains and have fun, or go out and find the rabbit and still have fun. That sounds like it's talking, that's like the great comment you were making about that, is finding these joys inside of things, and nobody can
Right.
take it away from you. You discover
No.
them yourself. And that this COVID-19 is going to be much the same thing. We're going to get to where, and right now they're talking about vaccines and various ways of dealing with it, and that's great. But at the same time, being able to um, um, find the ordinary about it, the routine
Right.
of it, and then work within that, accept that, and then start moving again, so to speak.
And perhaps finding the joy in the ordinary or the joy in the
Yeah,
routine.
absolutely. Yeah, somebody mentioned something like, I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I've heard this expression, but there's somebody who was working in a large office area with a lot of people, and now that's a desert and they're working from home still. And they're
Right.
speculating, well, we'll probably go into the office starting next month, 1 or 2 days a month, and still
Wow.
be at home. So a lot of isolation, and having that idea of um, the starkness of it. And she said, I've gotten through what she called COVID depression.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I've heard anybody really spin it that way. She said, now that I've gotten through that, I like getting up in the morning.
Hmm.
I'm starting to do things that I didn't do because it affords me, I get right up, go right to the desk, and get started when I need to get started, and I get a whole lot more done. I've had a lot of people
Well,
tell me that.
yeah, that they've kind of hit their stride and found their productivity again. I think what you're describing is grief.
Yeah,
That they're, and grief is cyclic, is not linear necessarily. You can go from acceptance to right back to denial.
yeah,
And I think you can see daily examples of that. But it is kind of getting to the point where you have to spend some time of acknowledging the losses, experiencing those feelings, finding healthy ways to express them. But then also you find kind of a new way of being and a new way of living life
yeah,
and creating the new normal.
yeah. I think you've got to making a great point, because I'm remembering. Um, I think of grief and healing as about 10 different processes. I'm not going to go into any detail except for spinning off of what you're saying, is that it's so much of a grief is a healing process. Grief is not a disorder.
Hmm.
And having to be at home and learning to wear masks, it's been chaotic. And when
Hmm.
can you go out? When can you not? How do you get to the store? How do you find toilet paper? It was just chaotic. And then it becomes um, a little more um, routine in a sense. Sort of, we get numb to it, maybe. I don't know. But
It
then,
becomes familiar.
yeah, somewhat familiar. But there's this point of realization, like you were saying, where we start recognizing what's going on now. We start seeing it, recognizing there's so many points of
Hmm.
this is how it is.
Right.
We,
This is life now.
we've seen so many people in foreign countries wearing masks, and we just scratch our head like, they wear masks,
Yeah.
and we're wearing masks.
Right. And
So
now we are.
there's a shock,
Well,
and
and
yeah, go ahead.
and masks now too are a fashion statement. You can, find a mask with your favorite sports team, with your favorite fabric, so again, you can turn this into this unpleasant activity that we're all needing to participate in into
Right.
something positive, a personal expression.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, you're exactly right, that masks are going to be, one time we didn't wear clothes, shirts,
Right.
pants. Now we got designs all over them, and we wouldn't
Right.
do anything without a fashionable shirt or pants on. Or same thing
Right.
for a mask, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Look at how
So
we adapt. We don't
another
even
way to
realize it.
accessorize. Yes.
Yes. Great. Yeah. I need some of those accessorizing masks.
Yes.
That's a great point, what you're bringing up about trauma and working through it and recognizing it. And it's different for everybody, valid for everybody.
Hmm.
One of the things, now you are, like you said, you just went for a swim this morning. You're an endurance athlete, quite a lot. You've done a lot of
I've
triathlons,
done, yes.
marathons. Yeah. And I have too. I miss those days. I've got a, I won't go into too much detail, but Doc says, no, running is not the thing you need to be doing anymore.
Right. Yeah,
But
we're past that point.
yeah, one of the things though that I recall that was, I mean, well, I loved riding the bike. I mean, in triathlons, you swim, you bike, and
Hmm.
then you run. If somebody listening isn't really familiar with it, the swimming was pretty fun. I felt pretty good
Right.
about that. I felt really good about the bike, and I didn't feel near as good about a distance run because I've not been a distance runner. Even though I've run marathons and triathlons, I'm not one of those fast people that do that. I just do it because it's a challenge, or used to.
Right. Yes.
And I got to thinking about the wheels, and I got to thinking a lot about the only, and long story into short, it's about physics. And it's called,
Yes.
in physics, there's this idea called the moment. And the moment of a wheel, which is a term I tend to use when I'm talking about trauma and anxiety and gathering yourself into some peace, is the only part of the wheel and the only time the wheel ever matters is when it's touching the ground.
Hmm.
None of the rest of the wheel matters, except for maybe momentum.
Okay.
And
Right.
when you're racing and you're going over gravel or turning on a tight turn, are you thinking about the top of the wheel or the front or the back of the wheel, or are you just conscious of is that wheel hitting the ground and sticking there so I don't wipe out?
Right.
Right,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
because you're
Exactly. Point of contact.
right, and we're pushing it as hard as we can because it's a race.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that point of contact is the only thing that matters. That is the moment. But we could get all wrapped up into the part of the wheel that just hit the ground. That's not going to do us a lot of good. Or the part of the wheel that's going to hit the ground won't do us a
Hmm.
lot of good because we need to be focused on what's actually hitting the ground, and that's all.
In the moment.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
think about the moment of the wheel, and it's that thing like, I don't know if I pronounce this right, Lao Tzu talks about if you look into the past, that's depression. If you look into the future, it's anxiety. If you stay in the moment, it's peace.
That's peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's
And
a great point. Yeah. You're
yeah,
right.
it's kind of that kind of an idea. So in with coping with COVID-19, I think a lot of the, and I'm going to ask you this because you're bringing up trauma. How much of fear and trauma is speculation that things are going to turn out badly? Or what I did yesterday was horrible and that makes me a bad person. I didn't cope well at all. The past dread or the front,
Mhm.
Anxiety of the future and creating scenarios that aren't there.
I think that has a huge part of it. I think that's a great point. I think it's on. I think it is human nature, perhaps our survival brain, that has us remember the bad things so we can prevent them from happening tomorrow and anticipate. Because I think there was a point in time in history when that's how we survived, was being able to anticipate. But the
Hmm.
dangers ahead of us. But I don't know that that's as useful in our day-to-day life now.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can create that negativity or that those negative neural pathways where all you are expecting or anticipating is the worst. I also think because with COVID-19, so much is unknown, so much of this
Right.
is scary,
Yeah.
and it's scary because it's unknown, so there's not a way. We haven't been here before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there've been pandemics before, but life is certainly different now than it was 100 years ago. The mobility, there was not air travel in 1918 with the
Yeah.
most recent pandemic. So there's not a way there isn't a story to go, okay, this is going to be all right. We don't know that. We don't know.
Right, right, right. You're raising such a good point about the unknown. I'm sitting next to, and it just kind of happened, and this is dark enough where you can see it. I've got a
Yeah.
glass that I would say is half full. All right.
Okay.
And
Yes.
I'm not being optimistic. I'm just stating a fact. But to me, it's half full because I like what's in it. But
Yes.
what's in the bottom half is the only thing I know of that's useful to me.
Right.
What's in the bottom half of a half full glass is where anything useful. Up here, yeah, there's air, but I can't really move my head over it and and inhale that. If the air went out of my room, I wouldn't have anything stored in there that's of use. There's nothing
Would be
there.
useful.
Yeah,
Right.
like you were saying, being useful. And it gets me thinking, because I've talked to people a lot about this, is one of the things that's so fearful, true, COVID-19, and I caught a little bit of news where President Trump was talking about, he used the phrase like, we know so much more now than we did when this thing started.
Correct. We do.
And there's tons we don't know, like you're saying,
Yes.
but we do know this. All right.
Hmm.
The what we know this is in the bottom half of this glass. And that's really all we have to focus on. That's all
Yeah,
we've
that's a really
got.
good point.
If
Yeah.
we start spinning our wheels up in here, we're going to traumatize ourselves
Right.
because we're going
Right.
to be in what we don't know, can't know, and like you said before, can't do anything about.
Well, and I think that's what
I'm going
you're
to drink some.
also have a drink there. Yeah, what you're pointing out, which is truly valuable, is recognizing the things you can do something about. And so using that information that we do know now, what we do know is that masks make a difference. So
Yeah.
there are things that we didn't know before
Yeah.
with any certainty. Uh, and so being able to focus on that, keep that in mind. And, the other thing too, using past experiences. Maybe
Right.
we haven't been in a pandemic before, but we've been in other difficult situations.
Yeah.
Applying it personally, thinking of difficult situations personally you've been in, and your ability to be resilient, to move forward, to come out okay.
Yeah. To get my glass again, in case I get thirsty, you just said past experiences where you have all kinds of skills,
Right.
knowledge, things of this nature. Is that in the top half or the bottom half?
It's in the bottom
It's in the
half,
bottom half.
right?
So when
Yeah.
we begin to think in terms of scaring ourselves, we know we're floating into the top half where we can't know anything, don't know anything.
Hmm.
Maybe we'll find out, but if we dwell in what we don't know and can't know, we scare ourselves. And
Right.
that's traumatic. But if we stay here, like the points that you're making, like you stay focused on what you've already been able to do, you've already learned how to do some of this stuff in the past, you can draw into the present
Hmm.
and then create healthy plans because of what you've done already that's been successful.
Hmm.
That can be a way of dealing with COVID-19, because every day there's something we know. And the more we stay in the bottom half of the glass, we can create that top half and
Right.
make it huge and unbearable. People talk about getting overwhelmed. That's a lot when that happens. To me, we go into crisis if you look at the bottom, and let's say this is like river water, and it's a really good way to illustrate it, because in river water there's this. I think one guy told me it's called turbosity. It's floating stuff in the water.
Okay.
If I go to the sink, well, we have filtered water like in Memphis where I live, but you might. There's places where it's very healthy to drink the water, but if you hold it up in a glass, there's junk floating in it.
Right.
So let's say that represents all this COVID-19 trouble, all the floaties in it. You could still drink it and not be hurt, but it's the fears or the needing to cope all the time, wearing the mask
Mhm.
all the time, distancing all the time, being so conscious of health all the time. It creates a lot of stress. But at the same time, going back to something that we talked about earlier, there are good things all the time as well.
Right.
And
Right.
if we keep our goods mindful at the same time we're aware of our trouble, we don't go into crisis. When we forget the goods, we go into crisis.
Right.
So that mindfulness of what we actually have is big, I think. And I'm thinking it's helpful in coping with something like COVID-19. Is that sort of mindfulness?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. That being aware, being mindful of what you can do, what you have done,
Yeah.
what your skills and resources are.
Right. And there's information coming out all the time.
Right.
And instead of fearing, like instead of paying attention to it because of fear, you could pay attention to it to create your plans and stay healthy, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think, and I keep thinking about you saying that a lot of times trauma can be a perceived thing, a perception,
Right.
because not everybody that goes to war comes back with PTSD.
Exactly.
But they may be in the exact same war theater and maybe even the exact same vehicle that had an IUD blow up under it or around it or whatever.
Right.
And it's
experience the same situation.
Yeah,
Correct.
and it's not about strength and weakness in people. It's just different and different perceptions, and then you begin to work with that because presents different things. But one of the things that I hear people say a lot that creates that is how they form their thoughts. And one of the things that creates this throwing the mind up in the top half of the glass so much is two simple words. What if? What if doesn't think about how what if throws us up into the unknown versus the known.
Right.
What if ungrounds us? Where if or when or to prepare for a possibility grounds us. Like you were talking about activities.
Right.
But we throw in this thing, to me it's a 3-part deal that scares us to death. What if, and then it's followed by a real concern, I should get sick from COVID-19. And if then we create, this is where we necessarily go. If we start with what if, we go into a worst case scenario.
Right.
All right. And we're leading ourselves usually into something like, I'll die. Or I'll be sick on a ventilator for 3 years or whatever. We create a horrific scene or a terrible scene when, if we're in the moment of the wheel, is that happening? No.
You're not, you're just staying in the present.
None of that's happening.
Right.
But we create a reality that anxiety feels like a reality when it isn't one.
Right.
So much of the time.
Your brain is tricking you into thinking something's true that's not true.
Yeah, it feels tangible.
Right.
But it's not. So if we can catch that thought form, what if, here's my genuine concern, then here's that vapor that scares me to death, I'll get sick and I'll be on a ventilator forever, or I'll die, and then what will my family do? We're creating stuff we can't even manage.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and you're just creating more negativity. I mean, the opposite, you could take that what if. What if I found the cure to COVID-19? What if or what if they come up with a vaccine? You can use what if and the other, because the positive outcome is just as likely as the negative outcome. So what if I won the lottery?
True,
what if?
True.
So I think, what you're talking about is thinking, and we do have some control over the thoughts that go through our head.
But, if you what if I won the lottery? I'd go broke in 5 years like everybody on the TV shows. I'm careful, personally, I'm careful about using what if at all, because it throws us into the unknown anyway. So if we chunk what if we catch what if and turn it into something like if I get COVID, I will. And then create a plan.
Right.
Because when we throw in those worst case scenarios, our anxiety goes through the roof. When we come up with some kind of reasonable plan, and the plan is grounded in what we already know.
Right, and skills we already have, and information we already have. Yes,
the bottom half of the glass. That's the moment.
And that reduces anxiety.
Yeah.
That will reduce the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think going back to what you're saying about what you read in the book and thinking about trauma, it sort of it helps us deal with the trauma we're going through right now.
Yeah.
To be able to knock the legs out from under it by making a plan that we can believe in.
Right.
And
giving you something actionable that you can act on.
Yeah. Am I staying in the moment, or I'm in the bottom half of the glass? However you want to look at it. And when it's serious enough, create a plan. Come up with a plan that you can buy into.
Yeah.
And you may never have to use the plan.
Right. But having the plan can give you some sense of comfort.
Yeah. That always reminds me of those laminated cards I used to carry in my wallet when I worked in hospital settings. I had to do CPR training, and the card would remind you how to do CPR training, like you're going to pull it out and read it. And
Right.
I remember I did the Heimlich on somebody once in a cafeteria, and then everything was over with. I've never used CPR on anybody, but because that was in my wallet and I'd been through training, and the instructors always say, it's going to come to you and you'll be fine. And sure enough, it's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
Just having the plan.
You knew what to do, having the plan.
Yeah, having the plan. And having one to manage COVID every day. And I liked what you were saying about within the scope of this traumatic, this pandemic, finding some freedom in that anyway.
Right.
You know, that's powerful. That's powerful. Staying out of that crisis think that comes with it. And yes, you can be a healthy person, and you can be an American and love the earth and not be in panic all the time just because of COVID.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy your family, and you can engage in positive activities, and you can have fun and laugh. Yeah. And, to resist the urge to go to the panic room.
Yeah. How does the author that you're reading, is anything else come to mind about how to commit or how to put all that together, how to keep it front of mind? Because I found that anxiety fills up a lot of space in the brain, and it's hard to squeeze positivity in there. But if you can get positivity in there, start squeezing the anxiety stuff out, the trauma stuff.
Yeah, part of what I have seen in relation to anxiety is to think of it as sort of sometimes a noisy companion, but something that's kind of always there. And sometimes it's front of mind, and sometimes it's in the background, and sometimes it's really hard to find. But knowing that it's, and also recognizing that this too shall pass. When it's top of mind. And so I don't know so much that it's squeezing the anxiety out as much as it's just getting comfortable with it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's you again. And really, when you're able to identify it and kind of invite it in, or, name it, you diminish it.
Yeah.
So I think, I think part of what happens in healing with trauma is creating a new narrative. It's taking a story and changing it into something different.
And you get to do that.
And you get to do that.
Yeah.
And so with COVID, you can do that. You can change the story of COVID.
Yeah.
In how you choose to engage, how you choose to live your life, what you where you put your energy, what you focus on, what's important and valuable to you.
Right. It's like to encapsulate that. I like what you're saying about, basically in a word, accepting COVID.
Yeah.
Because there's a kind of acceptance that sort of, and I've read about it, and I've never found it healthy in writings regarding grief and healing, in different perspectives on it that I don't find healthy, which is acceptance is like just laying down and letting the steamroller roll over you. There's another kind of acceptance, though, that is, here's what it is. Sort of like
Right.
what we overuse. It is what it is. Now that I see it, now that I know it, now I can do something with it.
Well, and even the step before now I can do something about it is seeing it, acknowledging it, and physiologically feeling it. Like, okay, this sucks, or whatever it is. This is bad.
Yeah.
And just let that be true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's part of what acceptance is acknowledging it and experiencing it. And then, so, what do I need to do to heal from this and move on? What do I need to do next? I don't need to have the 5-year plan, but what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do in an hour?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Great thought. Great thought. Because keeping it in the present, keeping it now, and not getting out into what you don't know, can't know, and certainly COVID has enough of that. We don't need to create that.
No,
Yeah.
we don't.
So, very good, very good.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, keeping it being mindful of it, and I hope anybody paying attention would write some notes about it, go back, re-listen, make some outlines, just remind ourselves, because talking about it with you makes it front of mind to me.
Right.
And even though some of these things, I haven't thought of everything you've said, but I've thought of some of the things I've said already. But bringing it back out and talking it out with somebody brings it back to front of mind. I already feel healthier and a bit more confident that I can manage my experience with COVID a bit more solidly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in having this conversation with you tonight, it helps me to remember times in my life when I've used these skills and tools of other hard experiences that I've, been able to get through and learn and grow from. And so, I think that is also a valuable is finding other people to talk to.
Yeah. There's
always a good idea.
Yeah. I guess in thinking of sort of wrapping it up tonight, this idea of your narrative is powerful. I like what you said, because we all have our own COVID story in a sense, and it may be an oral story, talking to people about it, but certainly to write it down.
Yeah.
Talking is different than thinking, which is different than writing, which even physiologically, I think it's different. And it creates something. Yeah. And all of that, those are such great angles and tools to use in order to manage something that seems so unmanageable and create a way of management.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of control.
Yeah. So just take the pencil, put it on the paper, and get writing. Share, think about it, make a plan, and validate all this stuff that we're going through, rather than create scary stuff.
Right.
Not healthy.
Right.
All right. Well, I really appreciate us getting together and talking about this.
Thanks for setting this up. I appreciate that too.
Yeah. I think, we have a plan to do this on a regular basis and put this out where people can enjoy it and grow from it and learn from it. Maybe we can even hear from people, because our whole point we could have gotten on the phone and just talked about it. We've worked together for years, but to put this in a form where someone else can appreciate it and create their own path from something like this, we're going to be coming back more and more with things like this. And there's so much to do with
that. Yeah, there's so much to share.
And maybe we can talk about more finite aspects of COVID-19, plus all the other things going on too that we wrestle with to try to calm and be more healthy.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Great work. Enjoyed it.
All right. Yeah, me too. Thanks, John. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye.